The second lesson is read from Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 13, beginning at the first verse. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. You see, love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now, we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three. And the greatest of these is love. Sitting on a convocation stage during convocation in the front row is no easy task. First of all, you have to be sure not to cross your feet in the wrong way because somebody's going to be staring at them. There's always somebody in the audience looking at you. You have to be careful not to be too chatty, and with respect to those in governance, I've met a whole lot of MLAs, municipal government people, and MPs who like to chat during the reading of names and people crossing the stage. I wondered what to do myself, as I will often be up on the stage for convocations. And happily, most of those occasions to this point, we're sitting beside Bob when he was serving as mayor, representing the town of Wolfville, and he taught me a trick. See, Bob never got too chatty. Bob always looked extremely focused. Bob could pay attention to each person crossing the stage as they celebrated their graduation, and so I asked him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, the trick is I'm looking at their shoes, actually. I'm looking at those high leather pumps and wondering how they're going to make it down the stairs on the other side." I am a little bit made to laugh when I see sneakers that have been colored with marker to celebrate the day, or those very classy-looking Oxford black shoes. And he would check every one of them out, look at the person, and be able to focus. And we all sat in the audience or somewhere else thinking, "Oh, he's so in tune with each of the graduates." And he was, but in his own way, teaching a lesson in concentration. That's my memory that I have as I'm on this stage today. As we gather here, yes, smiling and laughing at good memories, but so too being sad. As a community from many different walks of life, we gathered in this place to remember our dear friend Bob. And it would be our preference not to be here. We would rather have Bob in our midst as we have always had him. And we wonder at the fairness of it all. After long years of service and looking forward to a retirement filled with new adventures and opportunities to contribute to community and family, Bob instead faced the fight against cancer. It's not fair. In the face of this tragedy, in the face of that unfairness, though, In the face of our sadness, we have chosen to do something which I think represents Bob's ongoing spirit and life. We have chosen not to suffer in our sadness alone. Echoing Bob's own example of facing things head on in the company of others, we gather in this place in order to remember, to share smiles over things past, and to lend our strength to one another in our grief. The little hints of shoes on a stage or something else. With Bob's assistance, because he had a very active hand in planning this service, you and I have the benefit of two pieces of scripture of faith which accompany us in this most difficult of times. I invite us for a couple of moments to consider the truths of the two lessons I read today. May they be for us a call to seek and to find some measure of comfort, while at the same time allowing us to be renewed in the positive memories and the example of living which Bob leaves as part of his legacy to us. The writer of Psalm 23, often thought to be Shepherd King David, seems to, in this psalm, be taking some quiet moments on a hillside pasture while reflecting upon a dependence and confidence which he chooses to place in God. The perils of life, the things that may threaten us, are not dangers which we face alone, and this is what the psalm writer is figuring out. The psalm writer expresses a quiet confidence in the architect of the universe who cares deeply for each one of us. Now, I'm not here today to counsel you down one particular road or another, but I do see the value here in this psalm writer saying, find another upon whom you can place your dependence and trust. Poetic words in this psalm of nurture and care describe how the writer is held precious in divine loving embrace. And I'm going to avoid the empty platitudes, though, that often emerge at such time when we read scriptures. He is in a better place. It is God's will. Well, no, the place we would rather Bob be is with us now, here, yes? And it is not a God we worship whose will is for us to suffer and to lose and to experience loss. It's a fact of life and a fact of just sad circumstance. We are struck by the unfairness of it all, Bob leaving us too early. We feel the pain, the aloneness. Maybe we can listen to the psalm writer and remember Bob's example and do something different. Within the solace of our own private moments and also our solidarity as family and community, we gather here. Wherever we find ourselves in our faith perspective, our differing worldviews, we should follow that lesson, that in the trials of living, the burdens of loss, we are not alone, nor are we encouraged to isolate ourselves in the midst of grief and in trouble. The psalmist looks to another for protection, for sustenance and safe haven. He's not only speaking in terms of after we die, the harder times in life, such as this one, where we're grieving the loss of our brother Bob, are occasions where we should seek to depend upon one another in the dark nights of our soul. Even in those places that we don't have firm definitions or that we can't understand fully, there's a place where we know that we can have trust. I have lived in the valley for a number of years. Many of you have lived here longer. Many of you visit here from time to time. There are a number of different definitions as to when you have arrived at the valley. It might be a border. It might be a particular sign. Most often, Bob included, when speaking with him, have described when they know they've gotten to the valley. You know that crest of the hill just before Avonport? And you see Blomidon in the distance on a clear day? And usually if you're with a valley resident who's lived there all their life, or a great part of their life, if they're passing through you, that's the type of we should have when we know that we are together in home, in community, that there's a trust we place. We perhaps cannot fully explain how Blomidon got there, whether or not it was Glooskap's sitting stool to rest, or we can talk about tide and erosion of landmass, we know that collectively we can go, there's a trust that we place. The psalmist invites us to have that trust, to have a place where we can depend upon one another rather than be isolated. The second lesson read this afternoon also holds some valuable counsel for you and for me. Much of what is said in the 13th chapter of Paul's letter to the Corinthians was mirrored in Bob's life and example for all of us. You see, Paul is writing to a group of people in the ancient municipality of Corinth. They were doing all sorts of work together as church, as community, but they were having a difficult time of getting along with one another. Many meetings would end in arguments and petty wrangling. Maybe some people dared to go past 11 o'clock in the meeting. Different points of view would clash with one another, and the core reason for them being together in the first place would be lost. One could almost imagine it is a bit like town hall meetings from time to time. The Apostle Paul is concerned about this, though. He points out some things to them that can help them as community.